A military mistake that might cost Ukraine the war. Let's start first. How did it start? First of all, let's go through a bit of an idea to know why the war between Russia and Ukraine started. Tensions between the two countries started in February 2014. Following Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity, Russia annexed Crimea. During these tensions, Russia supported pro-Russian separatists fighting the Ukrainian military in the Donbass War. The first 8 years of conflict also included naval incidents, cyber warfare, and heightened political tensions. Beginning 2021, Russia built up a large military presence near its border with Ukraine, including neighboring countries like Belarus. At the same time, Russian officials repeatedly denied plans to attack Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized the enlargement of NATO as well. On February 21, Russia recognized the two regions as independent states. After that, in days, Putin announced a special military operation in Ukraine during a televised broadcast, marking the start of the full-scale invasion. He also stated the cause of the full-scale invasion on Ukraine, and he stated why he ordered the army to move on the offensive. During this video, I will be explaining and showing some images of what mistakes Ukraine made and what they should have done. And at the end, you'll get a small conclusion of what will happen during the rest of this war. Stay tuned. Now, let's start talking about phases. The first phase is the preparation. During all this time, there was some minor conflicts on the borders which should have been recognized by Ukraine to build up its defenses accordingly. From March to April 2021, Russia commenced a major military buildup near the border, followed by a second buildup between October 2021 to February 2022. The Russian government repeatedly denied it had plans to attack Ukraine. Though, in early December 2021, following Russian denials, the US released intelligence of Russian invasion plans, including satellite photographs showing Russian troops and equipment near the border. As well as, the intelligence reported a Russian list of key sites and individuals to be killed. The US released multiple reports that accurately predicted the invasion plans. What was Ukraine's mistake during all that time? Why did they collapse on the front for a few months until they recovered the momentum? Let's check what happened. Prior to getting the US reports that Russia is building up its military on the borders, strategically speaking, Ukraine should have started to build up defenses instead of training for a conventional war against Russia. We all know that Russia is a world power with huge military capabilities and technology. They already control the sea and they have air superiority. What should Ukraine do to survive the invasion? They should have started preparing for the invasion since 2008. But how do you plan to defend against Russia? That's actually a very important piece that they should have worked on. During ancient times, when a small country or group can't fight against a big country, they used something called guerrilla warfare, which would have been, in this situation, ideal for Ukraine to fight off Russia and defend their ground. They used it later on, which helped them a lot in the war, but they could have used it early on and gain an advantage during the war. Ukraine was all the time preparing and training for a conventional war, which was not the answer for their problem. They knew that Russia had other plans. Instead of losing time and training on something that can't help them against a second or third world power, they should have focused on their defenses. And the result of that was their quick collapse for the first few months until they changed the strategy. The great strategy that Ukraine did was that every time they pushed and take back ground, they took their time into fortifying their positions and make sure that they get a support line going so they have a steady logistical line between their back lines and their front line. During this time, a counter-offensive was launched by Ukraine in the south in August and in the northeast in September. It was successful, which made Ukraine get back the Kharkiv Oblast. Though, in the course of the southern counteroffensive, Ukraine retook the city of Kherson in November and Russian forces withdrew to the east bank of the Dnieper River. At the end of September 2022, Russia annexed four oblasts of Ukraine which it had partially conquered during the invasion. At this point, the Ukrainian strategy was working well, but from my own perspective, they should hold ground, fortify positions, and then prepare for another counteroffensive, which would give them an advantage for also to defend against Russian offensives. And as we said from the beginning of the video, the Ukrainian army can't fight head to head with the Russian army because they have air, ground, and naval superiority. So they should go to guerrilla warfare, which worked really well on the outskirts of Kiev and helped them stop and destroy a huge Russian offensives. To fight an army with huge capabilities, instead of fighting head to head, you should go and try to fight with pockets. And because of this war, the idea of having big strong tanks was found not effective, because one simple soldier with an anti-tank weapon that cost $100,000 could destroy a tank that cost around $5 million, which would make a great cost for the Russians. On October 8, the Crimean bridge partially collapsed due to an explosion which helped the Ukrainian forces cut off supplies and logistical support from the Russian army. From a strategically point of view, that is one of the best points that an army could make, cut off supplies, which leads to a retreat or a surrender, especially that the White Bear is coming. The blast on the Crimean bridge led to a retaliatory missile strikes and artillery barrages against Ukrainian targets, military and civilian. The missiles tried to destroy Ukrainian infrastructure. During the month of October, Ukraine managed to recapture some key points and was able to push back the Russian forces to the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. Now let's get to the important part. What was Ukraine's mistake during all that time? Why did they collapse until they recovered the momentum? Well, Ukraine knows that the borders with Russia is a dangerous and huge place. And since the start of the tensions, and especially that Russia occupied Crimea, the Ukrainian military did not prepare on the east, southern and northern front. They know that Russia is a big country with one of the biggest armies in the world. They also know that Belarus is an ally. They should have put the option that Russia might use Belarus to launch an attack on Ukrainian land, especially that Belarus's borders are close to the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. Also, facing a big army like that, they should make lines of defenses as the French did against the offensives of the Germans in World War II, although it didn't work really well, but they were able to hold them off for a good amount of time. And not to forget to mention, the Ukrainians started by fighting a conventional war against the Russian army, which is the worst possible idea, and they got it a bit late during the fight, which made them lose a lot of unnecessary casualties and equipment. A war against a big country like Russia should be fought by guerrilla warfare, which is the best tactic to fight against a larger and more capable country. The war has just entered the phase of burnout. The last man standing will win the war, and that is the advantage of the Russian army because they have a bigger war supply. The tactical advantage of Ukraine is that they are fighting for their land and their people. Russia is fighting the NATO expansion. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like it, subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos.